Hey guys, this is what if Izuku / Deku was evil part 1. If you guys end up enjoying the video, then make sure to like and subscribe, or else you guys are going to have to hear Bakugo and Deku fanfic forever. And I know, most of you guys don't want that. So, you guys should like and subscribe. And yes, I said most of you. I'm looking at you, Cryptics. So, Deku at this point is at the doctor's and is about to be told whether or not he has a quirk. But before any of that happens, let me establish some background info. Deku's mom, aka Inko, would be living alone at this point, trying to get day to day with many different jobs. The reason is that she's basically in debt and can barely keep a roof over her head at times. Most of those jobs are working at fast food restaurants and stuff similar to that. One of these jobs would actually be at a bar though. This bar is not high class, but it pays more than most of her other jobs. It's here that a man would one day walk in. At first, both didn't really pay attention to each other. They didn't really notice each other at all. But it was when he was about to leave that they both locked eyes on each other. And that's when it was, to put it simply, true love. They both turned away a bit flustered and the man just walked out. And unbeknownst to Inko, he would actually go in the next day in the morning and ask for her. But she basically wouldn't be working there because in the morning she works a whole different job. She mainly just works at the bar at night. After the manager told him this, he would be a little upset. But he would end up pulling a pen and paper and writing his phone number down, then giving it to the manager and telling him that when she arrives to give it to her. And on that paper, it was basically his phone number. Later that night, Inko would finally get to work. The boss would then hand her the paper and she would be a little surprised that he actually took an interest in her. The only problem at this point is she doesn't have a phone because she had to sell it in order to pay rent and for money. In order to work around this, she ended up just using the manager's phone, and doing this, they were able to establish a time and day where they can, go out and see each other. From here, the man decided to take her out. But before that, they decide to introduce themselves. During this, she would find out his name is Hisashi. After that, they went out to a restaurant, and this restaurant was really high class, and it was pretty expensive, so she didn't know what she was going to do, how she was going to explain to him that she can't pay for this. And when the time came, she explained everything, how she barely has any money and that she probably couldn't even afford anything in this place. And that's when he told her that, don't worry, I'll be paying for everything. And that night, she ate like a full queen. She ate a lot. Cause it's been a while since she had actual really good food. And not just junk that barely costs any money in order to, actually eat. A few months later, Hisashi would end up convincing Inko to move in with him. Before this, he was actually helping her out with her bills and getting her nice things, which she felt bad for taking, and whenever she would talk about giving him something, he would only respond by saying, "Your love is enough of a gift," which would always work. And he's been to his place a few times, not that many, but he basically lived in a mansion, and it only took a month or two for them to move in. Because during this time, they were still trying to get, everything worked out. He had maids, expensive food, a pool, and a whole lot more. During the next few years, they would eventually have kids. And yes, kids as in plural, as in multiple. Twins to be exact. Izuku and Izumi, which I know it's a common name for what ifs when Deku has a sister. They're fraternal twins, which means they don't look alike at all. Deku has his normal black and green hair, while Izumi just has black hair. As they all grow up, Hisashi starts to reveal his true colors. To be honest, he started kind of being like Endeavor, wanting kids that are strong. At first, it was about love, but then it turned to whatever you consider that. When it came to the day that they were supposed to know what their quirks were, it would be pretty important to Hisashi and Deku. Deku would be the most excited out of the pair. He still had the dream of being the #1 hero, but after all the tests and all the things those doctors had to do, he would come in with a somewhat sad face, but also trying to hide it. The doctor would say that Izumi actually got Inko's quirk, but it was a lot stronger. That she'd be able to pull and push objects, and depending on what kind of training she would go through, she had the potential to use her powers on huge objects and things that are really heavy. This would put a smile on Hisashi's face, and then Deku would ask, "What about me?" And the doctor would respond by saying, "Well, your case is a little weird. We were able to establish that there could possibly be a quirk, but either it hasn't established yet, it's really weak, or you're quirkless. And so for the time being, you're labeled as quirkless." Now this would put a really disgusted look on Hisashi's face. Deku would look confused as in that moment, his dreams shattered, but he didn't want to give up. Inku would start crying just a little bit, knowing how much he wanted to be the #1 hero, and would just say, "I'm sorry, Deku." Izumi would somewhat make fun of him, but mainly in a joking manner. The whole ride back home was silent, except for Deku talking about Izumi's quirk and how awesome it is/would be. When he got home, he heard his dad and mom somewhat arguing. He'd be the main one screaming at her, and eventually Deku would hear a loud slap. He would also hear his father say, "How could you produce such a useless son?" Later on, they would have dinner, and Deku wouldn't have gotten a plate. Instead, he was sent to his room hungry, and at this point, he's 4, almost 5. He then gets to school the next day, and instead of riding in some sort of limousine like he usually does and getting there fast, he had to walk the whole entire way on an empty stomach. By the time he gets to school, the bell had already rung, and everybody had also knew about him being quirkless. When he enters the room, the teacher had a disgusted look on his face, and a lot of people were smiling, kind of making fun of him basically. And the reason everybody knows is because Izumi would have told one of her friends, and then it just spread like wildfire. All the students and teachers now knew. When he goes to sit down next to Bakugo like he usually does, instead of Bakugo being like friendly towards him, Bakugo would instead aggressively ask him why he was trying to sit next to him, and also made a small explosion knocking Deku to the ground, and it would also send a pencil flying, which would also stick into his leg, and the desk would end up falling on Deku's arm. Everybody would start laughing at him, and no one, and I mean no one, not even the teacher, would help him get up. His arm felt like it was about to fall off. Izumi would watch the whole thing and somewhat feel bad for him. He just stood there, looking. He would eventually get the desk off of him, then walk himself to the nurse, which helped him out. Only a little, not too much. He would then get back to class, and during the whole entire school day, he didn't eat anything. He had to walk home again on an empty stomach, and when he got there, he looked sick, out of breath, pale, and would have passed out on the way in. Inku would have tried to help him and get him a bit of food and water, but Hisashi would make her stop after giving him just a little. He still had a bit of hope that he would get some sort of quirk soon, since the doctor said that there was a possibility. He waited 2 years, and at this point, he was around 6 or 7, and nothing, absolutely nothing happened. Throughout all this, Deku would be bullied, beaten up, starved, and dehydrated a lot of the time, at the point where now he's pretty used to it. He can go a really long time without eating or drinking water. And one day, Deku would walk home from school like always, and when he got there, he'd be greeted with one small backpack and his father just standing at the door. Hisashi would tell Deku to get out of his house before he has someone remove him. Inku tries to convince him not to kick out Deku, but it doesn't work. He tells her that either she stays with Izumi and him, or she goes with Deku. The only reason he isn't kicking her out is that Izumi needs a mother figure in her life, and Izumi is already attached to her. And Inku thinks about it for a bit. No matter what she does, she's abandoning a child. She doesn't want to go on the streets again, and so she ended up just choosing to stay, which would make her cry and feel bad. This would make Deku sad, knowing that basically everybody has abandoned him now. He leaves with just a backpack, and to his surprise, he actually finds a note in there, and it was from Izumi that managed to pack up a few things that his father didn't want her to. Some of these items include money, snacks, and his favorite All Might toy. Although she would poke fun of him and never really tried to help him out, she actually really cared about him, but was really scared of her father and what he would do to her. Deku would then leave and head into one direction, where he would eventually find a place to sleep. It was a cheap hotel that he was able to afford from the money Izumi gave him. He wonders if he should even go back to school at this point. He still wants to become a hero and prove his dad wrong, but he has no quirk. But little did he know, he already somewhat had a quirk. There's a reason why Deku never ended up really dying from starvation, dehydration, or the lack of sleep. It was from his quirk. And his quirk, I don't really have a name for it, so you guys have like any suggestions, just like put it in the comments. Basically, to sum it up, his quirk basically allows him, so he doesn't need basic human things, like he doesn't really need food, he doesn't really need water, he doesn't really need sleep, and overall he doesn't really get tired too easily. Like he can still feel tired, but his body won't actually, get tired, but he still like feels the effect of it, if that makes sense. And that's like one of the main reasons he hasn't even had to go to the hospital at all or anything like that. During the next few years, Deku would have trained and trained and trained. He still wouldn't really find out about his quirk but he would somewhat notice how he doesn't really get tired that easily and would be able to work out like for long, and I mean long period of times, and notice how he doesn't really sleep that often. And since he doesn't really need food, he basically ends up saving a lot of money because he doesn't even notice when he's hungry. He would eventually find a job that he can do and earn money from it, even though he's underage. With all this, Deku would be able to buy weights and other things in order to train. Instead of only training for like half a year, he trained for years, running and running until his legs wanted to explode, along with his arms, his everything. It was here when he started to try examining himself and wondering why he can't really get exhausted that easily. He thought that maybe it could be his quirk or something, because as the doctor said, it might be a small power, which is kind of what it is, but at the same time it's extremely useful. And as I explained, although Deku himself can feel tired, or feel as if he's tired, his body can't actually give out or be exhausted. So he can technically run forever, but he'll still somewhat feel, himself running too much, but his legs can still keep on going no matter what. Deku would be training all day, all night, only sleeping whenever he had free time and whenever he didn't feel like training. Also, and he would only really eat food that would be necessary for him to like grow, because although he doesn't need food can still help him. And throughout the years, he would still be angry at his father and at the quirk system. How just because he didn't have a quirk, he was being abused, starved, hydrated, everything. He still had hope with his maybe newfound quirk. Maybe he could change and become a hero. Cut to him, and he's around 10. At this point, he's pretty strong and quick. And at this point, Deku still felt, broken, as if something was missing from his life. And he's really strong for his age. He still isn't at his maximum, not nearly, since he still technically is in the body of a 10-year-old, so he can't really, get too big. And the monster incident happened a lot sooner than canon. I'm talking about the one where Bakugo is basically saved by Deku, kind of. Deku would be going through an alley where the sludge villain was about to attack Deku, but he saw the dangerous look in Deku's eyes, and he instead ended up passing him. And that's when All Might would turn the corner and ask Deku where the sludge villain went. But unbeknownst to him, the sludge villain already was in the sewers. Deku would point the direction the monster went, and Deku would scramble in his backpack that he always carried with him, and would scramble for his notebook, where he would ask All Might for an autograph, which he would respond by saying, "Sorry kid, can't. I have to catch up to the monster before anything happens." And Deku would be a bit sad, but said okay, and the monster would escape through the sewage as I just said. That's when he would end up running into Bakugo and take him hostage. All Might at this point would end up wasting a lot of power flying and jumping and all that through the air, trying to find the monster. And he would basically waste almost all his power and, deform. Deku would eventually run to where the sludge villain was taking Bakugo hostage, and none of the heroes were trying to even do anything. They couldn't. And instead of Deku waiting for backup, he decided to be reckless and instead plans to try to fight him. Deku would actually do decent, but since he's unexperienced in fighting actual things / people, he would end up losing, and All Might would have to instead jump in order to save him, because if he didn't, something could have happened to 2 kids on his watch. And while everybody was congratulating All Might, one of the heroes would pull Deku aside and start telling him off. And instead of thanking him, he would have gotten mad for Deku being so reckless, saying that he or Bakugo could have gotten killed. Deku would have said that he was sorry. Deku would walk up to All Might. That's when he would ask the $1 million question, "Can I be a hero even though I don't have a quirk?" And All Might wouldn't give him a straight answer, instead saying that if he wanted to save people without a quirk, he should instead become a cop. It explains how even though they usually only bring in the villains or detain them, it's still an important job, and without them, many lives could be at risk. Or better yet, be a doctor, save lives, and that maybe he could even save a hero's life one day. And this was not the answer Deku wanted. All Might basically said to his face, no, he couldn't, and he should probably give up on becoming a hero. Everyone would just start laughing and giggling at Deku, while All Might just stood there smiling. And Bakugo would catch up to Deku and be really mad at him. And Bakugo would try beating up Deku, but Deku didn't want any of it, and would instead kick Bakugo to the ground and would just leave. As he was walking back home, tears would fall down his cheek, and Deku would actually be on the news, and his mom, Inka, would see it. Tears falling down, knowing that he's still alive and at least somewhat safe. Someone else would end up seeing the news, All for One, and at this point he's still somewhat recovering with the fight with All Might. At this point, All for One knows that All Might's injuries will make him weak, and he would have to pick a successor soon. And chances are he'll be looking for someone at UA, since that's where the top of the top are going. And he wanted to find the kid, aka Deku, because they showed part of All Might basically telling Deku that he couldn't be a hero, but they also showed somewhat showed a part of Deku fighting, because somebody was recording all of it happening. And All For One would actually be somewhat impressed that someone this small would actually, be able to like fight a villain. And again, Deku basically did good, but since he was inexperienced, he still ended up losing. But All For One basically saw his strength, and All For One knew at this point, chances are Deku's dreams would have been shattered. And All For One has actually been wanting to find a kid that would help him / be willing to go to their side and help them infiltrate UA and find out who that successor would be in the near future. And the League of Villains are in the early stages, but All For One has been wanting to give Tenko, aka the leader, the hand on the face man, some sort of teammate. At this point, Deku is 10 and Tenko is 16. So he thinks with the right training, it could end up helping all of them, and it could help them bring down the symbol piece once and for all. All For One would end up saying Kirogiri on a small mission to find Deku and try to recruit him. And if you guys don't know who that is, it's the one that basically makes Black Mist. I'm pretty sure that's what his villain name is. The one that's able to create like little pocket dimension or portals, whatever they're called. Soon after the encounter with All Might, Deku didn't even go home. He didn't really go anywhere. He simply walked around not knowing what to do anymore. All he can do was think, my dream, my everything has been shattered. All because he thought I was quirkless. This part I just should have been quirkless. And instead I'm stuck with this lame power because again, Deku still doesn't 100% know if what he has is a quirk, but he knows it just isn't normal, and he doesn't know if, again, it's a quirk or his body has basically just adapted. And to him, his quirk seems useless. Without even noticing it, Deku would start walking upstairs to a building. He would then go to the edge of the building and start to think about it. If I fall now, will anybody miss me? Does anybody even care? And then Deku closes his eyes and starts counting back from 3. Unbeknownst to him, Kirogiri would have already found him and would have saw Deku on top of the building. He would then see Deku falling, and he would rush, creating a portal in order to break his fall, which he would still kind of slam into a wall because of the way the portal worked, and Deku would pass out. Kirogiri would take him back to their base, which is a bar at this point. So, this is a little peepsqueak All For One was talking about. Also, I tried to do a bit of research about how Tenko basically refers to All For One, and I have no idea if he calls him like sensei or something, or if there's, some sort of name for him, so let me know in the comments if there is. Yes, I found him right when he was about to jump off a building. This kid's insane. What makes you sure he would want to join us? Well, to put it simply, he was abandoned, like you. And just before he was about to jump off the building, he got to talk to All Might, and his dreams were shattered by him. On top of that, he's quirkless. The quirk system has failed him. The heroes have failed him. And Deku would be asleep for a few hours. And that's where I'm going to leave off for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. And if you did, like, subscribe, turn on notifications. Don't forget to join the Discord. Link in the description below. And other than that, I'll see you in the next one. Peace. I got 3 thoughts on my dick. Bust down Gucci all on my fit. I tell my wrist, roll it in a strip. She like Ash Cash, only the tip. I be